Hey, Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, so good to be here with you.
Amazing. And it's beautiful where you are. I just love snow.
I know I want to pinch myself every day. I'm up here in the mountains and get to see God's country.
It's so beautiful. My daughter's 4 and she's never seen snow, and she reminds me every
Oh
year. And I'm
my
like,
gosh.
because I
When are
grew up
you
in
going to
Chicago.
fix that? Come
I know.
on.
I grew up in Chicago, so I'm like, I've seen enough snow for a lifetime. Sometime we'll fix it. Anyways, I'm excited to have you on. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Bob Fraser. I guess 40 years married. Just celebrated 40 years last year. Four amazing grown kids and with their families. And I am one of the partners of a boutique private equity firm that I founded.
Amazing. How did it start? What did your journey kind of look like?
Well, that's a very long question because I'm an old dude. So that takes a long time to answer because it's every twist and turn you could possibly imagine. So I,
Yeah, well, if we're talking marketplace Christianity, how did you kind of come to where you are now? What did that look?
okay,
Did you
all right.
like in
Well,
or
sure. So I have a very different journey. I grew up atheist. Okay. So I grew up in an atheist home and I became an atheist. I was a preaching atheist. I was a evangelistic atheist. I was hardcore. And at one point, I had a Christian girlfriend. I don't know why she was hanging out with me, but and she would invite me to her meetings. I would go mock everybody. I mean, it was bad. And God had His revenge. I get radically saved in college, and it's an interesting journey. I think I had a grandmother who prayed for me, and of course my girlfriend prayed for me. And something happened in my heart where I knew that God was real, and I knew I needed to find Him. And Easter 1980, went into a Catholic church, took communion, and gave my heart to the Lord. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anything about it. I couldn't read the Bible. I tried to read the Bible and it was gobbledygook to me. Now, so I was a computer science major, okay, and I was 4.0 kind of dude. So I was super like one-sided brain and extremely rational, extremely logical. And I had no concept of God or anything about it. I did not like Christians at all. I thought they're all fakers and thought they're all pretentious and thought they weren't courageous. If they believed this, why didn't they act like it? And that'll change anyhow. So I didn't know anything, but I tried to read the Bible as gobbledygook. Ended up getting involved in a campus ministry that was wonderful. Got baptized in a bathtub and got filled with the Holy Spirit at that time. And I went from a guy who couldn't even understand the Bible to a guy that only wanted to read the Bible. I couldn't put the Bible down. I probably read it 30 times cover to cover inside a year. Took 1,000 pages of notes, and it was just like drinking from a fire hose. This was my senior year in college,
So cool.
and told my pastor I'm quitting school. I have one quarter to go before I graduated from UC Berkeley, which is the top computer science school in America at the time, and told him I'm quitting school. And he said, "Wait a minute, why would you do that?" I said, "Because God doesn't care about computers." And I was 100% focused on being a pastor or a missionary, right? Because God, everybody knows if you're going to serve God, that's what you do, right? You got to do that. I don't know how I knew that, but and I did graduate, and then immediately, got a couple jobs, but then immediately became a pastor of a small campus church. I've been saved like 3 years, and so I pretty much knew everything in the Bible by then, and so you can imagine how bad it was. I mean, just know it all and young, arrogant, know it all, and I mean, over the top, John the Baptist, kind of not in a good way, I mean, just like hardcore, preaching to all my 35 compromisers every Sunday because they weren't full-time ministers, right? And so, oh God. So anyhow, I got fired, and after a year, and best thing that ever happened. But I was stunned and ended up going into the workplace and getting a computer programming job for about 10 years and loved it. I just loved it. I just really good at computer programming, and it was just, I was really just enjoyed it. And then a guy came and gave me a prophetic word at one point. and called me out of a meeting and said, "You're going to be a pastor of a business."
Hmm.
And all my alarm bells went off. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to be a real pastor. Don't put that garbage on me. And, I mean, it was a bad word to me. I literally took the tape.
I
Remember
repeat
cassette
you.
tapes? You remember cassette? Remember those? Yeah, these little things, these little square things, and it had tape.
I remember.
And I took the tape and I told my wife about this word, and I threw it in the trash in front of her and said, I'm not gonna be a pastor of a business. I'm gonna be a real pastor. Well, guess how my story evolves. Right. So I ended up moving to Kansas City. I was in Los Angeles, and I went to Kansas City and tried to get into ministry there. And I was a lay preacher, teacher kind of person. Did a lot of that, but there's just no open doors. And started a .com in the mid '90s, and that's what the book Marketplace Christianity was about. Is that journey. And I started it, and I didn't really even have a vision for business. I mean, I kind of had an entrepreneurial itch all my days, but I didn't have a spiritual vision. It's like, feels like business is worthless, right? To the kingdom, right? I didn't understand it. And, but then what happened is business just blew up. I ended up, I raised $44 million in venture capital. It became the fastest growing business in the Midwest region of the United States in the late '90s. Ended up winning the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2000. And I hired, nearly, I think, 280 employees. But the most important thing was that happened is I started to have a revival in the business, little move of God in the business. And I was stunned. I mean, it wasn't because of me, okay? It wasn't because I was some spiritual dynamo. I mean, it just happened. It was kind of spontaneous combustion, and there was a kind of a divine mix that I can talk about what happened, but I was stunned by it and blessed by it. And then the business blew up. And, it blew up, and then it blew up in the .com crash, lost everything. And wrote the book Marketplace Christianity. So that's that story. And then I spent 12 years kind of in a marketplace ministry, encouraging businessmen and women to bring their faith to work. And based on the book, and spent 12 years traveling the world speaking. And then I met my partner, 12, 13 years ago, and started just going back to business. I just love business too. I just love business, and I love ministry. I'm this really, right? Like so many of us, right? We've got this dual calling. If I spend too much time in ministry, I kind of I just want to do business. And if I get too much time in business, I want to do ministry stuff. So I was that guy. And anyhow, so started this boutique private equity firm, Aspen Funds, and it's been fun little rocket ship last few years.
Amazing. I love your story. I didn't know you were an atheist at one point.
Oh yeah, hardcore. And I get atheists, but atheism is a religion. You have to believe it. You can't disprove God. Okay, it's not possible. If you believe there's no God, it's belief. It is faith. It is faith. So I love atheists, it's like, bring it on,
Bring it on. I bet. Okay. So cool. So what does Marketplace Christianity look like? So when you had that revival in the business, what was going on?
Well, so what had happened is I had hired and that was a secular business. Okay. It was a secular business, 100% just normal secular software internet business. But I had hired a number of Bible school dropouts. Okay. And what they don't tell you about Bible school is there's no off ramps, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing to do with a Bible school degree. Only like a tiny percent end up in kind of church work or something. So a lot of them came to me to get jobs as spiritual washouts.
Yeah.
Right. But they're fiery. They love God. They're passionate, right? Oh, it's perfect. It was just awesome. So they come to me, thank God people need money. Thank God they need money. So they go into the workplace where they can start to interface with human beings and not their little Christian bubble. And they can start to, just be around people that have needs that are unbelievers. And so anyhow, that's what happened. And so I had a mix of maybe, it depends on the early stages. There was a lot of Christians, and as we grew, it got fewer and fewer. But I would just hire my friends, and I hired these people from Bible school who hired their friends, right? So we had a core of fiery believers. And I remember at one point, this was really a turning point in the business. One of my main leaders, my Christian leaders there, had said to me, said, Bob, we have a lot of believers here. It's like, why don't we have a meeting of just the believers and you can share your Christian vision for the business? And I'm like, okay. I didn't have a Christian vision for the business at the time. But we had a meeting, and to this day, no one remembers what I shared, including me. But one of the guys there, in fact, the guy who told me to start the meeting, shared Colossians 3. And it was like electric. It was like people, all of a sudden, all these Bible school graduates got their marching orders. It felt like they just got activated. And Colossians 3:22 through 24 says this: slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. And slaves, it's talking about in the Roman Empire. I mean, slaves, these are just workers at the lowest level of possible, right? So, but it applies to anybody in a job. Obey your earthly masters in everything, not only when their eye is on you and to win their favor, but with sincerity of heart and the fear of the Lord. He said, whatever you do, work with all of your heart as for the Lord, not men. Wow.
I have that behind me. That's my scripture book.
I mean, that verse preaches, and I have never heard a message on that except out of my lips. Mm-hmm. It is, and it's even repeated in Ephesians 6:5-8. And it says, whatever, work with all of your heart. Now, how many Christians put their heart into their workplace, where you literally put your whole heart into work? No. You withhold your heart from your work and you give it to your family and your church. Right? You don't want to get too much into money or business or success or help in this, but that's not what the Bible says. Give it everything you have, but not apart from God. Bring God in. It says it is the Lord you are serving, and you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. Same as Paul the Apostle. By doing what? By simply doing everything you do as unto the Lord. Well, so what happened is all these believers in my business got just massively activated, and they started working as for the Lord. They started working as for the Lord. I'll tell you a little story. One of my guys, and this is just kind of just a rough dude. He was unpolished, let me put it that way, but big heart for God. And he was one of my computer techs who kept the computers working, which back in those days was really difficult. And we were having problems with some of the computers going down, and we had set up a pager system so that literally a little beeper would go off and let you know the system was down. And so you come fix it. And so I'm pitching to all my techs to come wear the pager, right? And I'm like, who wants to wear a freaking pager? So you get up at 3 a.m. to go, put out the crisis. No one. So I've got a room full. I got maybe 6 techs in there. And I'm kind of giving them the vision of, laying it out, do it for the company and the importance of this and how appreciative we would be, blah, 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 right? And this guy is in there, Paul Hoover. And as I'm just kind of getting ready to make my pitch, of course, no one's looking at me. They're staring at their shoelaces. No one's making eye contact. No one wanted to do this. They're like, oh no, and Paul Hoover jumps up. He just jumps up like this and he raises it. He says, I'll do it. I didn't even ask yet. He says, I'll do it. He said, I'd love to do it. And as he's walking out of the meeting, he says, just one more way I can show Jesus I love him. That's what he said. Yeah. And all the other techs who were mostly unbelievers, they loved his Jesus at that point, right? Thank God for your Jesus. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Because your Jesus just saved my bacon. I don't have to carry the pager. And that's an example of it was so stunning and so otherworldly. And this happened regularly. This kind of thing happened regularly in the business. And so it's just like this buzz throughout the business. And for years, it was crazy.
That's so cool. So you have the Christians that are working as unto the Lord, and then the non-believers are kind of witnessing what they're doing.
They're watching this going,
Mm-hmm.
wow, what is this? And we had a couple real evangelistic types who would always be sharing Jesus at the water cooler. It was amazing. A lot of prayer, a lot of praying for people, and we had a bunch of people give their lives to the Lord during this. I remember one guy coming in and was waiting to meet with me, and he was just sitting in the lobby for like 30 minutes. And he came in after 30 minutes and he just he's kind of like mind blown or something. And he said, "What is it about this company?" I'm like, I was not on the same wavelength. I didn't know what he's talking about. He said, "Just different. Everything's different here. It feels so different." And I'm like, and I finally, after the meeting, I thought, I know what he's talking. He's talking about the presence of God. It was so thick. People were loving one another. People were hugging one another, and just so for one another. Just had just this really a holy vibe everywhere. It's pretty neat.
Did you ever have any like angry atheists that were there that were like, didn't want to be a part of it?
We had a few. We had a few. I would have to kind of remember the stories. I think people just loved on them and just let them, But when you're paying people well and they like their job and you're respectful to people, it's one thing to really bring the Lord in. It's another thing to bring the Lord in with great respect for where people are at. And I think that's what people object to. It's not that you have faith, right? It's that you're disrespectful of other faith or of lack thereof. And that we never allowed that. It was very clear that we're going to respect everyone. We're going to honor everyone. But yeah, we had Muslims there, a bunch of them. We had some very angry atheists, and but there was never any blowups. Not that I recall.
So you did that first meeting with all the Christians. Did you continue doing meetings after that?
I was very reticent to become kind of a Christian CEO because I wanted to be the CEO for all my employees. So I didn't want to sponsor those things, but I encouraged other people to do that and just let it be more organic. And there was a lot of prayer meetings that were happening, but I said, hey, on your own time and with respect for everybody. And so that's exactly the way it played.
Cool. So you said you didn't have like a God-given vision when you started it. Did you develop one over time?
Yeah, for sure. And pretty much by watching what God did. And it really is that, the marketplace is the front lines of Christianity, right? I mean, if you work with unbelievers, well, that's where faith meets not faith, right? That's where kingdom meets not kingdom, right there. And so you're a missionary. If you're going into a secular setting, you are a missionary who is pretty much unsupported by the church, pretty much not envisioned, not empowered, not trained, not equipped. Yeah. It's still, I get a little angry when I think about this. How our world, our Christian world is organized around formal churches who are around certain once a week meetings. And it's kind of ridiculous. That's not where faith happens. Look at Colossians 3:22 through 24. Always be willing to give a reason for the hope that is within you. It's talking multiple times. Rome was not a Christian empire, right? And by 300 AD, it had become a more like a majority Christian empire. And Eusebius, writing at the time, said that most of the leading families of Rome had become Christians. Well, how did that happen? Because of the slaves in their households, right? And so Christianity is this powerful, organic thing. And we as Christians need to empower this organic movement of believers where they are. And if you're in a secular setting, that is your field of ministry, and the people you're around is your flock. Period. Everyone here has a field and a flock, and so we're to treat it like that. So that's the vision. And yeah, I wrote another book called A Light, and it's about 8 ways to shine the light in the workplace without being weird, and getting massively promoted in the meantime. And of course, but the first one is working as for the Lord, right? Because if you work for the Lord, you will be the best worker that ever has been seen in that company, right? What will you hold back? You'll give it absolutely everything. You'll be the greatest servant. People will love you. You will get promoted. And so my heart is just to empower Christians in the workplace. And yeah, I definitely have a vision for it as the place where the kingdom happens, the main place. Maybe God happens in churches, but and the Bible says, hey, let's not give up the habit of meeting together. But that is a pretty weak statement. Mm-hmm. That's it, right? Let's not give up the habit of meeting together. Okay. But he really commands people how to live their life in the secular world. Mm-hmm. Right? Go live your faith in front of people. And primarily that's the workplace in our world.
How do you think marketplace ministers can be better equipped for their mission field? Is that something that the church should bear the responsibility from, or what?
100%. I mean, Ephesians 4 says he's given us the fivefold ministry for the equipping of the saints for works of service. So we need the pastors to be training marketplace people how to pastor their flock in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. We need evangelists to be training the people how to evangelize in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Right? We need prophets to help people to prophesy in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Right? We need teachers to help people teach about God in the workplace. So it's all about equipping, and our fivefold ministers are not doing this, as far as I can tell. Mm-mm. And so, read my book, Marketplace Christianity.
It's good. For our listeners, I was telling Bob that his book was on our reading list for my school, the Global School of Supernatural Ministry. And as I was reading it, I'm like, I know Bob, because we were in the little break together. It's a great book, and I highly recommend it. I loved how just like practical it was and the stories that you shared within that book. Did you have any like hard lessons learned about bringing in your faith into the workplace?
Yeah, hard lessons. I don't know if I call them hard lessons. It's not easy to do because primarily a focus, right? Everybody, you're thinking about your job. You're especially start a new job. You're trying to, learn everything and figure it all out and all this. And I think one of the ways to be effective is to just be focused on the people. Mm-hmm. And just start to ask God questions about all your people in the work, like your colleagues. What do you love about them? What are you doing in their lives? What's your heart for them? And just be attuned to the people. And but as far as hard lessons, I think I'm trying to think of hard lessons. I mean, give me an example of something maybe that you've encountered.
Well, maybe like serving clients and there's like backlash, like the client isn't happy, for example, of like, how would you practically handle situations like that?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, let's say you're serving the Lord, right? You're working as for the Lord and the Lord isn't happy. It's like you do your best. And I mean, that's normal business. And you're going to have clients that aren't happy. And it's like,
Right.
take care of people, do whatever it takes to help them to get there. Yeah, I mean, it's not, marketplace is hard. I mean, just the marketplace apart from God is hard.
Right.
But bringing God in helps us navigate those things, right? If he's there with us, if he's helping us, I mean, I have a full-time God living inside, right? With unlimited power, unlimited wisdom, knows every question I could possibly ask, right? And has every answer. That's unfair, right? Remember, I,
Unfair
I asked
and
I asked my son once. I said, "What's it like to be a Christian in the workplace?" And he just started laughing, and he said, "I have a majorly unfair advantage."
mhm. Very,
So I think that's where to bring God in,
mhm,
right? And the challenge is to not live two lives.
mhm,
Right? To have a Sunday life, or a Sunday and a family life, and then a work life. That's the challenge.
mhm,
Is we want to live these separate lives,
mhm.
and we don't. Jesus didn't live two separate lives, right?
Yeah.
He had a single life and a single reality, and so we want to integrate them as much as possible. That's the biggest challenge, and bring this amazing, loving God everywhere we go.
Amen. Um, do you have a time where standing firm in your faith maybe cost you something in the marketplace?
Time when standing for the Lord cost me something in the marketplace. I don't think so.
Mhm.
I don't think so. And that's kind of weird after thinking about that being in for so long. But I have this. I don't. I don't. I guess my view is maybe different than others.
Mhm.
I've just spent time with John Maxwell, who is one of the greatest
He's amazing.
marketplace believers
Mm,
in the history of the world.
mhm,
And he and I were so in sync. I got to spend some time with him, and and just this idea that God really is for everybody.
mhm,
He really is for everybody. If you're the worst sinner on the planet, he's really for you. He loves you dearly. Doesn't like everything you're doing, but he doesn't like everything I'm doing either. I'm sure, right? It's like I have this very generous God and this generous view of God. So I know people that get in trouble by had one guy. It's like he started getting really upset about the way homosexuals were being treated in a business, and decided he was going to take a stand and kind of be this warrior. And I've never felt like I had to do that. If that's what you feel like you had to do, honestly, it just doesn't feel like something we should be doing. It's like just making a stand for just to make a division, right?
mhm.
Just to bring a division. And I know some people feel that, but I just never did. I felt like I wanted to love people. And I feel like that's what God is wanting to do, right? And yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about that, I'm happy to share my beliefs
Mhm.
about those things. But my job is to love God and to love humans.
Yeah.
That's my main job. And so I never felt like I needed to, just really berate somebody or demean somebody, or I don't know, disrespect somebody. Um, I mean, if there was something unethical, I wouldn't participate. But I would do that gently, right? As much as possible. And as much as possible, live at peace with all men, as Paul said. So, yeah, these are such great questions, but
Awesome. What about building wealth as an entrepreneur? Like what does the Bible say about building wealth, being wealthy? And do you
yeah,
see like what does that look like for you practically?
yeah. I just feel like I'm to build a massive amount of wealth. And it's just who he's called me to be. But the reality is, okay, I'm 64 years old. I'm probably not going to live forever. And everything I've built is going to be given away to someone else, right? And so it's living with the reality of the clock, right? That I want to make sure I'm the most generous man that my generosity has to match my wealth building, right? And Jesus' seminal teaching on wealth was in Luke 16. And I have another book on this that I've not yet published, but his seminal teaching, and this is another one, another scripture that literally I've never heard preached, and that even the commentaries don't get this parable. And there's the parable of the unrighteous steward. Mm-hmm. Remember the guy who basically is going to get fired, so he robs his master by discounting the receivables, and then he gets praised. End of parable. It's like so weird. Christians just can't figure this out. It's Jesus's seminal teaching on money. Mm-hmm. It is powerful and has completely shifted and transformed my life, this understanding and the way I live my life and the way I treat money. You want me to give it to you?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So there was a rich man. The rich man is God, who is very rich, isn't he? He owns absolutely everything, right? He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. And then he had a steward, which is us, right? We're his stewards. And the steward was accused of being unfaithful. What is it with his master's wealth? Well, what does that mean? Well, so God owns everything, reality, right? So he owns everything in your checking account, doesn't he, Rachel? And so as a steward, could you be accused of ever treating his checking account that's in your name as yours? Yeah, right. We all do that. We treat what we have been entrusted with temporarily as our own, mm-hmm. right? And so we're unfaithful. Mm-hmm. And so we all do that. I do that. We all do that. And so he says, all right, time's up. Well, time's up. Well, all right. So you've got 40 years left. What's 40 years is 15,000 days. Mm-hmm. So you've got 15,000 days left on this planet, right? So time's up. So he says, you can no longer work for me. So what that means is your time on the earth is about done, mm-hmm. right? And even if so 14,000 days left in your life to do whatever you can do to maximize your life. And this would be because then eternity is coming. And when you're 1 billion years old, you'll be a young whippersnapper, right? So we have this little teeny tiny brief window that's about to end. And so what he did is he discounted his master's receivables. So what that means is you take from what doesn't belong to you that you cannot keep, which is everything in your checking account. You take, it doesn't belong to you, right? It belongs to the Lord. And it came from him. Everything came from him, right? And you can't keep it. It's going away in 15,000 days. And you turn it into something you can keep, that is yours and you can keep forever. That's by giving it away, by benevolence, generosity. So, I give to the Tim Tebow Foundation and he says, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous mammon. I even love that word, unrighteous mammon. It's like there's a dirty, there is a level of just, in most business, there's just a level of, it's not always righteous, right? There's something you sold to somebody that they weren't helped by your product or something, or whatever. But he said, make friends for eternity by means of unrighteous mammon. And so here's the picture. So I'm going to go someday, I'm going to stand before the pearly gates and Jesus is going to give me a big giant hug because I'm his favorite and he loves me. And so are you too, by the way. And he's going to say, Bob, come here. I want you to meet all your friends and I'm going to have a line of thousands of orphans and special kids. Line up and says, "You were the guy. You gave that money, and it changed my life. And I'll have that for eternity." Does that make sense? So I want to make as much as I can, and I want to change the planet as best I can, all before my time's up. Hmm. And so it's a matter of I want to do more. I want to make more money, just crazy amounts of wealth, and I want to be crazy generous with it because I know my time's up. I can't take a dime with me, right? But I can take way more than that. He said, if you're unfaithful with this very little thing, 3 times in Luke, he calls money a very little thing. But it's a very little thing that determines your eternal destiny. That's right. Your money determines your eternal destiny. That's right. Absolutely. And that's what that verse is about. He said, and if you're unfaithful with that which is another's, who will give you what is your own? And that which is another, he's referring to money. It doesn't belong to you. It's only temporary, all that thing. But if you use it wisely, you can convert it into eternal riches. So that's it.
Beautiful. So
isn't that powerful? It's like just go make your money, man. Go do it. But just make sure you give it all away.
Do you think there's any misconceptions that Christians have about building wealth?
Oh, gosh. Everywhere. I mean, I've had Christians that say it's just, don't want to touch money, that money is unholy. And I make the point in Marketplace Christianity, there's a chapter on money there. And I make the point, money is not evil at all. It's simply a means. It's simply a claim on the goods and services of others, and which is power. And so use it wisely. But there is so much weird teaching on money. And, from the guys who I remember listening to a teaching years and years and years ago, guys said, yeah, if you really believe the Lord, you'll be having your own airplane just like me. It's like, okay, that doesn't sound right, And then you got the guys who take the vows of poverty. And so it's just all over the map. But I've hardly heard good teaching on money. I haven't heard much good teaching on money. In case you can't tell, my fivefold gift is a teacher. I'm a teacher. Yeah. So I love to dig in the scripture and just pull out deep truths and that have life transformation, behind them.
Yeah, so good. What tips would you give us for just like leadership in the marketplace if you're leading an organization?
Well, there's 2 kind of organizations you can build. You can build a Christian organization, and where you're hiring all Christians, you can build a secular organization. That's kind of the first choice you need to make. And a Christian organization, if you're building, you just want a Christian organization, well, you're by definition not building optimally for the business, because you're not hiring the best people. You're hiring the people based on what they believe about God. So if you're building the best organization, you need to build a secular one. And by secular, I mean merit-based. That's really what it means. It just means merit. It doesn't matter where people go to church. It doesn't matter what they believe. What matters is, are they, meeting the objectives and business. So I think that's it. And then I think as CEOs, we have such wonderful opportunities to be influencers, to bring God in and in a good, beautiful ways. And that's primarily, and this is where it gets real, right? Primarily, it's not by being the Bible banger, right? Being the guy who's always up front talking about this or that, or being, very bold with their faith. I was never really that guy, but to bear the fruit of Christ, right? Be the guy who bears the fruit of Christ, love, right? Which is unselfishness. If you just do the one thing, right? So love is not, agape love is not emotions. It's not feeling something. Love, he defined it as the guy who helped the guy out of the ditch. So it's just being unselfish. It's unselfish, benevolent concern for the good of another. So if you love people, if you care more about their career than your career, you care more about their raise than your raise, you care more about their life than your life, that's unselfish. That is completely otherworldly. There's nothing like it. And you shine like a freaking, beacon. It's so weird if you love for really, really love. Right. Or next one is joy, right? Joy when literally everything is going down, right? Everything sucks and you just can't help it, but you just have this inner peace and joy, right? Peace. It's the same, right? It's completely otherworldly. So I think as a leader, it's to really know God and to become focused on being a great believer, on one who is deeply rooted in their faith and bearing the fruit of Christ is the main thing. Everybody's going to be looking at you,
You'll
right?
be the third one.
They're looking at you. And so the most important thing is to be real and to not be pretentious, but to be the guy who has love, joy, peace, patience. And patience is the word is endurance. It literally means to endure with humans. Mm-hmm. You ever been exasperated with a human? I do.
Never.
Jesus never gets exasperated with a human, right? Endurance, kindness, goodness, which is virtue, doing the things that are right and avoiding things that are wrong. Faith, it's not faithfulness, it's faith, literally having faith where you believe. Love, joy, peace, patience, as good as faith, gentleness, which is meekness, and self-control. So, those things are branded on my soul. I just want to be more like them. I'm still reaching, 64 years old. I still want to be a better Christian by far than I am today. I want to bear more fruit. I'm looking at John Maxwell. I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is like light years ahead of me. And I've been practicing this for a long time, and I got to keep practicing to get better, right? That's what you want to do. If you want to get better, you practice, right? So I'm practicing humility because I'm so bad at it. I'm practicing, all these things, right? And man, that's the main thing is to be real and to be authentically in love with Jesus, bringing him in, and you got to figure out what your demons are, right? What's your challenge? Is it, workaholism? You've got to make time to connect with God. What is it? How do you live a balanced life, right? And figure out what is your thing? What are the things that are your enemies, I guess?
How do you balance like working as unto the Lord, Colossians 3:23, with like going too far into workahol, like working too hard? You know what I mean? So like, where's the line?
That is such a good question. That is such a good question. And in fact, if you read that literally, it's like you can't go deep enough, right? And just throw yourself at it. And so there's, I remember when I was doing my .com startup, I was, CEO by day and programmer by night and weekend. And I had 4 young kids at the time. And, but I couldn't sleep. If I'd worked past 7 o'clock, I couldn't sleep. And so I finally decided I was going to stop at 7. And I was going to engage with my kids, and I was going to spend, a couple hours before bedtime just being with them. And then took all day Sunday off, no matter what. Whatever fires were burning, I took Sunday off. Mm-hmm. And so I think but to me, that was working with all of my heart as to the Lord. So taking the time to rejuvenate and to be better at work, right? Versus just exasperated, wrung out. To me, that is part of it. To be a great worker is to be a balanced worker as well. Someone who is able to bring the heart in, to bring their joy in, right? And if you can't bring joy in, are you really working as for the Lord? Mm-hmm. If you can't bring peace in, are you really working as for the Lord? Not really. So there's a balance to all that. Working as for the Lord means doing it His way too.
So like keeping the Sabbath and keeping
yes.
it holy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Putting boundaries in, healthy boundaries that help you be healthy.
Yeah.
whatever it takes for you to be a healthy person there.
Because
Right.
I find this line that can be so easy to cross of like working as unto the Lord and doing my best. And then it can become like idolatry of, I want this business to succeed no matter what the cost, So it's like finding a fine line.
That is so right. And, so I told you, my business blew up and God was there and then it blew up. I lost everything. It's like, yeah, you think you think you're building it for the Lord and you are, but he says, thank you. I'm done with it. It's mine, right? It's like, that's hard. I mean, that was the hardest stuff for me, right? To go like, wow, what is that? I gave you everything and it was an anointed little business, and then it dies this horrible death.
So what'd you do?
Got depressed. Tried not to. I'm not a depressive person at all. I'm super optimistic. So, but I spent a good year just like I was just circling the toilet bowl every day. I mean, just getting up and trying to put one foot in front of the other and asking the Lord a lot of questions. And, there were so many promises over this business and so many like prophetic words about how good, just the impact and everything. And I said, Lord, what about the promises? I just asked him. And I felt like he said, the promises are real, but for another context and another generation. And I'm like, what? So I thought when I went into the ministry stuff and I started doing marketplace ministry, I thought that was that. It was the other context and the other generation, right? And so the reality is the Lord is less concerned about your business, right? Your business, these things will come and they will go, they will be blessed and they will morph and then they will die and then a new one will come out of its ashes. And that's all good. It's all good. You look at a forest, there's trees that are young and growing, there's trees that are dying, and it's all nourishing the next generation. But the thing God is about, he's about creating his man and his woman. Right? That's what he is about. He's about creating a Rachel who is deeply rooted in him, mature in God, right? It isn't about just getting saved. It's about becoming like him. And that's giving our life to the Lord is the beginning of the journey. It's not the end. And so that's what he's about. And he lets you go through, it says Jesus learned obedience through the things that were suffered. Oh, worst verse in the Bible. Jesus learned, and the word actually is meekness through what was suffered. Oh, so why would Bob Fraser be exempt from that? And the truth is he wants us shaped. He wants us forged. He wants us refined, and we will go through the refiner's fire and we'll be forged. And that is this life. That is this life. It's a brief, terrible, glorious journey, right? With beauty and ugly. And we are to navigate that with God and make good choices. And in doing so, we are changed into his image. That's what he's about. So Luke 19, what's the whole point? What's the whole point of our work on earth? Right? And Luke 19 is the one he said a king was going away to receive a kingdom and then return, remember? And so he entrusted his wealth to 3 dudes. And he said, do business until I come. Okay, so that's what you're doing, Rachel. You're doing business, right? Until he comes. And then when he comes back, do you remember? This will be Rachel's Bible quiz for the day.
Oh boy.
What was their reward? What did the guys who are faithful, what did they get as a reward?
They got more.
Nope. That's Matthew 25.
Oh.
Luke 19, cities. You've been faithful with this very little thing. Again, money, very little thing. Receive 10 cities. So what if Jesus really is coming back? Okay, I believe that. Well, how long is he going to stay in the earth? Forever. It's his inheritance. And what if he doesn't want 8 billion or 9 billion direct reports? He's going to want to rule it with us. And that's what he says. throughout the scriptures, Psalm 37, many places, that those who are righteous will reign with him. And so he wants us to co-reign with him. So what if Rachel really is going to be a queen one day for real? Well, what does he want? What if you knew your daughter was going to really be a queen? What would you want to train her in? Would you want her to know how to deal with people? Would you want her to be very virtuous? Yeah. Would you want her to know how to resolve conflict? Would you want her to know how to manage money and systems? Yeah. In fact, a lot of this stuff, right? Well, guess what you learn in business? All those things. Yeah. So do business until I come prepares you for working with God for eternity. So he's less concerned about the business you're actually in and more concerned with he's watching as you're doing your business, Rachel. He's watching your heart. Oh, look at her heart. Look, yes. Mm-hmm. She's learning humility right now. Isn't that fantastic? Let's turn up the heat on that, right? Oh, you know what? She really needs to learn how to manage conflict. Let's give her some major conflict. And the more he entrusts you with, the greater the honor. Mm-hmm. He's honoring you with that because he believes you're able to handle it. And so it's treating everything with an eternal mindset that he is preparing you. It's less about what actually happens in the earth and the outcomes. We don't control the outcomes, right? And more concerned with the process and the journey.
So good. This has been amazing. Where can we connect with you?
I have my business website, I guess, aspenfunds.us, or my personal website, bobfraser.org, bobfraser.org. I don't post a ton, or I'm really not on social media, unfortunately.
But you have books, so they can.
I do have some books. Yeah, I got a Marketplace Christianity. It's on Amazon. I've got Kingdom Horizon, which is really about hope for the planet and hope for the earth. I think so many Christians are really trying to get out of the planet and trying to not engage, and they believe everything is going haywire. And I actually point out in the book that there's 25 charts in the book of what's changed in the earth since Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years, better or worse. And I show how the kingdom has been advancing in the earth for 2,000 years in spite of everything. Mm-hmm. And so just really a hope-filled book.
Cool. Well, we will put those in the description. Thank you so much for being here. It's been really great to hear more about your story and just to learn from you. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's so good to see you again. Been too long.
I know.
Your beautiful, wonderful face.
Oh, thank you.